Believe it or not, there was once a heist that absolutely shook America. And no, this wasn't just some regular money robbery. These guys went after cash that belonged to the President of the United States himself, Richard Nixon. Now that's insane, right? In this operation, the crew was unbelievably smart. They didn't leave a single clue behind, and tracking them was nearly impossible. The FBI even deployed 100 agents. But guess what? They still found nothing. So, how did these guys pull it off? Well, grab your snacks, get comfy, put your headset on, and let's dive straight into the story.
Who would have thought that this small, cozy cafe would become the silent witness of two lovers deeply in love? That night, the rain was falling softly, the kind of drizzle that makes everything look straight out of a romantic movie. But behind that peaceful scene, Henry James Baker was a nervous wreck. He was sweating, fidgeting, and trying to figure out how to tell his girlfriend, Molly Murphy, something he'd been hiding for a long, long time. And when I say long, I mean 2 decades of dating, and not once did he tell her this one big secret. So yeah, you can imagine how awkward this night is about to get.
Henry then started to open up about his past, back in 1972, when he was still living in Ohio. Now let me tell you, Henry's teenage years were far from perfect, guys. He was the kind of dude who couldn't be told what to do, wild, reckless, and had this weird obsession with speeding on empty roads. And from there, well, the hobby kind of escalated, from racing cars to stealing them. Yep, you heard that right. Our boy Henry was a full-on car thief. But hey, even a bad boy like him had an idol, the legendary Hollywood actor Steve McQueen. And despite living that fast and dirty life, Henry somehow never got caught. Well, except for those countless speeding tickets. Because yeah, this guy just couldn't resist going full throttle on the highway.
And that's when Molly finally found out the truth. Turns out, her boyfriend's real name wasn't John Baker. It was Henry James Baker. Molly, of course, thought, oh great, he probably changed his name just to dodge all those speeding tickets. But this time, she was dead wrong. Henry confessed that he changed his name because, well, he was actually wanted by the FBI. Yep, you heard that right. Our guy once robbed the United California Bank 8 years ago. And that robbery, it went down in history as one of the biggest bank heists ever in America.
Of course, Molly thought her boyfriend was just drunk and talking nonsense. I mean, who wouldn't? If your boyfriend suddenly says he's wanted by the FBI, you'd probably laugh too. But Henry wasn't joking this time. He looked her straight in the eyes, dead serious. Then, for some reason, maybe because he was tired of hiding it all, Henry finally began to tell the story. The story of how the biggest bank heist in America actually started.
So here's how it all began. Everything started when Henry and his brother Tommy worked at their uncle's factory, a grumpy old man named Enzo. Now, Uncle Enzo had one tiny little problem. He hated the President of the United States, Richard Nixon. Apparently, he thought Nixon was full of lies and greed, a man who got rich while everyone else suffered. Unlike Henry, who was wild and reckless, his brother Tommy was the complete opposite. Quiet, distant, and honestly, a little broken inside after fighting in the Vietnam War. Yeah, Tommy was a veteran, a war hero on the outside, but still haunted on the inside.
Now let's talk about Uncle Enzo. This guy really, really hated President Nixon. Like, not just political disagreement hate, but throw the TV remote hate. He couldn't stand Nixon's policies that hurt ordinary people, and the fact that Nixon wanted to run for a second term just made him furious. So when his friend Bobby came up with a wild idea to sabotage Nixon's re-election, Uncle Enzo was all in. Bobby told him that President Nixon supposedly kept $30 million hidden in the United California Bank. And get this, Bobby said that money wasn't even clean. He believed it was Nixon's secret stash, dirty money from corruption. So if they stole it, Nixon couldn't report it to the police because, well, how do you report someone stealing your illegal money, right?
At first, Uncle Enzo wasn't really on board with Bobby's crazy plan. I mean, come on, if it's just about the money, the guy was already rich, guys. He owned a big family business that made him more than comfortable. But when Bobby said the real reason was to stop President Nixon from running for a second term, Uncle Enzo's eyes lit up like a Christmas tree. That's when he said, all right, let's do this.
Next, Uncle Enzo started analyzing the California Bank. To complete his plan, he assigned Henry to scout around the city and find an alarm system identical to the one used in the bank. But guess what? Henry totally messed it up. When he tried to steal the alarm box, the darn thing went off loudly.
Sirens blared everywhere, and within seconds, police cars came rushing in from all directions. Henry had no choice but to hit the gas and show off his driving skills. What followed was a wild car chase through the narrow streets. Luckily, our boy Henry managed to slip into a tight alleyway, leaving the cops eating his dust.
That night, Uncle Enzo and his two brothers, Paul and Ray, held a coordination meeting. They were trying to find a solution for the alarm boxes mounted high up on the bank's walls. Technically, Enzo could have climbed up and disabled the alarm himself, but let's be real, the man wasn't built to dangle like a monkey for long. After hitting a dead end, Henry suddenly spoke up with an idea. "What if we just spray that alarm with an aerosol?" he suggested. The plan was simple. Once the spray hardened, the bell mechanism would stop working. It sounded risky and a little ridiculous, but everyone agreed to give it a shot.
1 week later, the 5 of them, including Tommy, drove out to California and rented a villa as close to the bank as they could find. As leader and mastermind, Uncle Enzo started studying the bank's blueprints and laying out the plan. Their idea was bold and blunt. Enter from the roof and blast open the concrete vault with dynamite. Enzo assigned roles. Paul would handle the explosives. Enzo and Henry would deal with the alarm and its sensors. Tommy and Ray would stand guard and prep the gear. Everything was scheduled for a Friday night, right after the bank closed at 6:30 p.m.
The day before the job, the whole crew showed up to recon the bank one more time. Lucky for them, there was a noisy bar right next to the bank, exactly the kind of chaos they wanted. That din at the bar would help mask any sounds from the dynamite they planned to use. To be extra careful, Uncle Enzo told Tommy to gather a bunch of sandbags. The idea? Cover the roof openings with sand so the blast noise heading upward would be muffled. Practical, a little ridiculous, and exactly the sort of thinking that made this crew dangerous.
With the plan set and everyone clear on their roles, the crew headed to the United California Bank the next night, sneaking in through the back like ghosts. They stuck to the plan. Ray carried a police radio to monitor patrols. Lucky for them, only one cop was on duty that night, and he was patrolling down by the beach, far enough from the bank. Once they confirmed the coast was clear, Uncle Enzo started cutting through the roof while Paul worked to disable the alarm sensors. After that, Paul moved on to drilling through the final layer of concrete that stood between them and the vault below. Meanwhile, Henry sprayed the alarm box on the wall with the aerosol, and Tommy waited by the side of the bank, arranging the sandbags to muffle the blast from the dynamite.
Everything went smoothly, and when all was set, they lit the fuse. Boom! The dynamite exploded, but the blast was way stronger than anyone expected. The entire bar next to the bank shook like it got hit by an earthquake. Bottles rattled, glasses shattered, chaos everywhere. Because of that, the bar owner panicked and immediately called the police to report what had just happened. Not long after that, 2 police officers arrived and immediately started inspecting the bank. Everyone began to panic, especially Ray, who just wanted to run for his life. But Uncle Enzo tried to calm them down and ordered Henry to go down and check the situation below. When Henry looked around, he saw the 2 officers circling the building. So, to distract him, Henry came up with a wild idea. Without telling Uncle Enzo, he changed clothes and casually walked straight into the bar next door. Once inside, he caused total chaos by picking a fight between 2 drunk customers.
Thanks to that chaos, the 2 cops rushed in and dragged the drunk guys straight to the police station for questioning. Henry's plan worked perfectly, smooth like butter. Once everything was calm again, the crew climbed down the ladder and entered the vault area. Uncle Enzo immediately took charge, giving everyone instructions. He told them to open every box they could find and prioritize anything valuable: foreign savings books, checks, and especially diamonds.
One by one, the safety deposit boxes were opened. There was so much money inside. They stuffed it all into the bags they'd prepared earlier. From all the boxes they cracked open, Uncle Enzo still couldn't find Nixon's secret stash that was supposed to be hidden there. Even after getting $4 million, Enzo wasn't satisfied. He was obsessed. But as the roosters began to crow, a clear sign that dawn was coming, they decided to wrap things up and come back the next night before the bank reopened on Monday. Before leaving, they sealed the hole in the ceiling, and Uncle Enzo slipped a small mirror into the crack. The mirror's job was simple: to reflect sunlight toward their villa. If that reflection ever disappeared, it meant only one thing: someone had found the hole, and they needed to get out of California fast.
But the next day, the mirror's reflection was still there, which meant one thing: the coast was clear and they had to go back in. That night, while Ray was standing guard outside, he suddenly spotted a suspicious car pulling into the bank's parking lot. Everyone froze. Their hearts started pounding. They thought it might be the cops. A few minutes later, more cars showed up, and to their relief, it turned out to be just a group of parents picking up their kids after soccer practice. What a close call. If those really had been cops, Ray was ready to open fire. The tension slowly faded, but that moment made Henry realize something. What he was doing wasn't just some wild stunt anymore. He started to feel guilty. He never thought this fun little adventure would drag him into something this serious. Still, he was already in too deep, and there was no turning back now.
By Sunday night, just hours before Monday, they went back for one last try. But again, they still couldn't find Nixon's money. Paul finally told Uncle Enzo to just give it up. Maybe that so-called $30 million never even existed. Besides, they already had $12 million in their hands, more than enough to live like kings for the next 7 generations. But Uncle Enzo wasn't satisfied. His hatred for Nixon ran deeper than greed. He couldn't stand the thought of that man running for president again. Still, there was nothing else they could do. The sun was about to rise, and Enzo had no choice but to accept whatever they'd gotten so far. Meanwhile, Paul went back to the villa to prepare everything for their escape.
The team finally split into 2 groups. Ray, Paul, and Uncle Enzo drove off to Las Vegas using a rental car. Meanwhile, Henry and Tommy decided to head home by taxi. Before leaving, Uncle Enzo made sure Ray cleaned up the villa. Just to erase any trace of what they did. He also left an envelope for Henry and Tommy, supposedly containing their share of the money. But when Henry opened it, there was only $20,000 inside. That means each of them got just 10 grand. Henry was furious. He couldn't believe his uncle gave them such a tiny cut after stealing $12 million in total. But Tommy didn't really care. He even handed his share to Henry. The only thing Tommy cared about was his precious baseball card collection he'd found inside one of the safety deposit boxes. During the ride, Tommy was completely absorbed in his baseball card album. He didn't even listen when Henry started talking about moving out of town and quitting his uncle's company for good. Henry felt like his uncle didn't care about him anymore, so what's the point of sticking around, right? Meanwhile, Tommy kept flipping through his cards, admiring every player like they were rare treasures. But then, he found something odd. A business card tucked between the pages. It belonged to the advisor of the President of the United States. And on the back, it said, National Kemble Bank, coupon number, and storage. But since Tommy only cared about his baseball cards, he didn't think much of it. He just tossed that business card into the front seat pocket, completely unaware that he had just thrown away the biggest clue of all.
A few days later, the bank they robbed was finally surrounded by the police after someone reported that the place had been hit. During the investigation, FBI agent Howard and his assistant Sharon found absolutely nothing. No fingerprints, no footprints, not even a single useful clue. All they discovered were a few pieces of broken glass, which probably had been there long before the robbery. But Howard wasn't buying it. He was sure these robbers weren't from California. Why? Because their method was way too professional. See, local crooks usually rob banks by storming in with guns in broad daylight and yelling everybody down. But these guys, they were calm, calculated, and surgical. Whoever did this knew exactly what they were doing. The next day, Howard was surprised when his office was suddenly swarmed by his superior. And not just him, but hundreds of FBI agents from all over the country. Startled, Howard asked, "Wait, what's going on? Why are there so many agents here? I can handle this case myself." But his boss didn't give a straight answer. He simply said, "This robbery has caused concern all the way to the White House." That's when Howard realized this wasn't just some ordinary bank robbery. Together with Sharon, they started digging deeper, trying to figure out the motive behind this mysterious heist. Soon, they both came to the same conclusion. Someone powerful had to be involved. In their experience, only one other case had ever made the government send this many agents: the assassination of John F. Kennedy. When they checked the list of bank clients, they found something suspicious. One of the account holders wasn't from California. His name was John. And the next day, after Sharon dug deeper, the name on the bank record turned out to be a fake identity. The real name was Charles Wendell Colson, none other than the special advisor to the President of the United States. Boom! Things were starting to make sense now. Howard finally realized way more than 100 FBI agents were assigned to what looked like a simple robbery case. It wasn't just about stolen money anymore. The cash those robbers were after belonged to the president himself. Howard then asked his superior to confirm this directly.
But his boss only replied, saying that the content of that safety deposit box was just a baseball card album, worth maybe $200 or $300 at most. Howard's suspicion grew even stronger. I mean, come on. Who would go all the way to a California bank just to store a baseball card album worth that little? Something clearly didn't add up here.
The investigation wasn't really going anywhere. To make things worse, Howard's boss even forbade him from digging deeper into Colson. But who would have thought? This was the moment when the missing piece finally started to appear. One day, while Howard was relaxing and playing his trumpet, he noticed the sunlight reflecting off its golden surface. And suddenly, bam! He remembered the same kind of reflection, the one he saw on top of the bank. Curious, he investigated further, and sure enough, the mirror was used to send a sunlight signal. It all made perfect sense now, especially since there were rental villas not too far from the bank. Without wasting any time, Howard ordered a full search of every villa nearby and listed all the names of those who had rented a place in the past week.
But unfortunately, after searching through all those villas one by one, they didn't find a single fingerprint, nor any suspicious tenant at all, until they checked the very last house. And what they found wasn't really a clue, but rather something kind of weird. Turns out the villa was rented under the name Steve McQueen. Yeah, that's Steve McQueen, the famous Hollywood actor. The agents were left speechless. Once again, their lead hit a dead end. They began to think that maybe their whole theory about the mirror reflection was completely wrong.
But just when they were about to leave the last villa, Sharon suddenly noticed something odd. A kitchen cabinet that wasn't fully closed. Out of curiosity, she opened it, and inside were stacks of dirty plates that hadn't been washed. And guess what? Those dirty plates turned out to be the game changer. Because right there, they found fingerprints. After running them through the FBI database, the prints matched 5 suspects: Paul, Enzo, Ray, and 2 others. 3 of them were quickly identified and tracked down. Easy catch. But the other 2, Henry and Tommy, were nowhere to be found.
Besides that, Sharon also got a new lead, a testimony from one of the villa's neighbors. According to them, 5 people were seen leaving the place separately. 2 of them took an online taxi, while the other 3 drove off in a private car. Now things were really starting to come together. The FBI traced the private car and found that it had been rented from Las Vegas. Meanwhile, the online taxi records were easily tracked down, thanks to one of the passengers who left a big tip under the name Henry. Boom! Another puzzle piece just fell perfectly into place.
And when Howard finally inspected that taxi, he found a few baseball cards and that same business card from Colson, the one Tommy had cast away earlier. At first, Howard didn't really understand why there were notes about a bank name, a file, and a deposit box number written on the back. But now, things were starting to make sense, guys. Turns out, what Uncle Enzo was desperately searching for, that so-called $30 million, wasn't actually money or jewels at all. It was a clue that pointed straight to where the real money was hidden, inside the Kimball National Bank.
After all the evidence was gathered, one by one, Uncle Enzo's crew got busted, right in their own homes, while they were chilling, enjoying the sweet taste of stolen money. Meanwhile, Tommy and Henry, who still had no clue what was happening, were just going about their normal day. But unfortunately, Tommy got caught first. Henry, on the other hand, was just out grabbing some takeout food when he saw everything, his cousin being handcuffed and shoved into a police car. And at that moment, Henry couldn't do anything. He just stood there, frozen, watching the guy he once competed with get taken away.
From that moment on, Henry disappeared. He ran away to a small town called Deerwood and started a brand new life under a fake name, John Becker. He even changed his entire look and eventually got a job as a bartender at a quiet little bar. And that's where it all began, the moment he met Molly. They started dating, and before long, Molly moved in with Henry, living together on the second floor of an old, half-abandoned movie theater. The funny thing is, the first floor of that theater was still open for business, and sometimes Molly would help the owner by swapping out the movie titles on the front sign.
For 7 whole years, Henry had been living with Molly, but deep down, he was eaten up by guilt.
He'd been lying to her about who he really was, and that guilt hit him even harder when Molly invited him to meet her family and proudly introduced him as John Becker. At that moment, Henry just froze. He couldn't tell her the truth because Molly's dad wasn't just anyone. He was a well-respected sheriff in town. And the last thing Henry ever wanted was to lose the woman he truly loved. Days turned into months, and months turned into years, until one day, Henry finally hit his limit. He couldn't keep running from his past anymore. And that's where the story from the beginning of the movie finally connects. All right, guys, let's continue.
After hearing everything Henry said, Molly just sat there, silent for a few seconds. Then she took a deep breath and said she didn't care about his past anymore because she truly loved him and she didn't want to lose him. But unfortunately, it was already too late. Before meeting her at the cafe, Henry had already gone to see Molly's father and told him the exact same story. He even said he was ready to turn himself in. That meeting was the last time Molly ever saw Henry, because moments later, the police arrived, along with Agent Howard.
Molly completely broke down. She cried hysterically, screaming Henry's name, not wanting to let him go. But Henry, he'd already accepted his fate. He held her hands gently and told her that this was the right thing to do. He said, "If I keep running, I'll lose you forever. But if I face this now, maybe someday I'll come back to you." Hearing that, Molly finally stopped crying. She looked deep into his eyes and whispered, "I'll wait for you, Henry, no matter how long it takes." The robbery of the United California Bank was the biggest in American history. But strangely, it was never widely exposed because it involved a scandal among the top government officials at that time. Henry was sentenced to 7 years in prison, but he got out after 4 for good behavior. And when this movie was released, Henry was still alive, working as a construction worker, living quietly somewhere in Southern California. Maybe, just maybe, he's even watched this movie himself. The title of his story is Finding Steve McQueen. And that's the end of our story. All right, guys, don't forget to hit that subscribe button, and bye!